Welcome into the Dynasty Dummies podcast. This is not your father's Fantasy Cares YouTube stream. If you're watching live, we appreciate you being here. If you were hoping for Scott Fish or Russ or Bob, we're sorry to disappoint you. It is just me and J Mike, and we're here to Hootenanny. We're here to kick off the 2025 rookie season. And if you are new to the Dummies, absolutely welcome. We love doing this. We love having conversations with everybody out there who is into Dynasty fantasy football like we are. If you are returning dummy, welcome back. We appreciate you. It's been a while, and it is good to be back and be here. And J Mike, it is fantastic to see your face.
It feels so good to be back. Nice to be with you, Zach. Nice to be behind the microphone. And man, these digs that we have.
That's nice, isn't it?
Man, somebody pump some money behind this operation. What we doing here? Glad to be here with you. Glad to be able to set the stage for what is one of our favorite times coming up with the annual tradition of our rookie Hootenanny. We've done it with far less equipment in the past. We've done it with more people and all sorts of things. The mantra remains the same here for the Dynasty Dummies, to be able to let you know what we see on the film and allow you to draw your own conclusions with what you do with that information. The beauty is there's so much left in this rookie process upcoming, and we're excited to be able to get things started and kicked off going forward. So, Zach, when we think about the Optimus primer, usually this is one that you go solo, and you allowed me to jump in here and look at me. I'm the captain now. You've allowed me to jump in here with you. Let's set the stage a little bit as to what today looks like and how these next couple months will look as well.
So I think the first thing, which because we're here, because we're in the Fantasy Cares digs, the first thing I want to do is remind people fantasycares.org/squares. There is a Super Bowl squares contest going. I think you got a couple days left to get in it. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. It's almost Wednesday as we speak. So that's up. And also, it's always a good time to donate to fantasycares.org. It is my favorite part of this community. It is incredible to be a part of it. It's incredible that we have been able to partner with Fantasy Cares to do the rookie Hootenanny. My film notes go to Fantasy Cares. I donate my film notes to Fantasy Cares, and they can be yours for a donation. We thank you with film notes. And even if you don't want my film notes, go ahead and donate anyway. But the Dynasty Dummies kind of ethos, mantra, like we are here to be accessible. We are not gatekeeping. The door is always open. The fire is stoked. There is coffee on. There is food at the table. Come. We enjoy the conversation. We enjoy doing this, and we hope you enjoy doing it with us. And also, yes, we watch a lot of film. Yes, we have done this. This will be my 10th year doing rookie evaluation. It'll be my 8th year for really public consumption of my rookie evaluations. That doesn't mean that I am any better at it than anybody else. It doesn't mean that I have a monopoly on this stuff. We are learning and growing and watching with you, and we want this to be accessible to everybody out there. So when we start talking about these players, and we will next week, this week is not a player-centric one. We'll probably give you a 30,000-foot view. We'll probably give you a little bit of the behind the scenes, how the sausage is made and how we do our evaluations. But what we're trying to do is be accessible. And I always go back to Jake Anderson, a good friend of both of ours, who the very first time I did this, he gave me the biggest compliment I've ever had in all of my years of doing fantasy football content. And he said that I had done a rookie show, and he said, you made these evaluations accessible. They weren't, talking over people. You don't have to go into, cover 3 and what this route was, and the all of the nitty-gritty details to give the overview of what you think about a player. And I think that, to me, that is important, because it shouldn't be gate kept. This is for everybody. This is not something that we're doing that you can't do. In fact, if you want to watch players on your own, we advocate for that. Take our process, or take pieces of our process that you like, use it for your own advantage. Use it the way you see fit. Evaluate players the way you see fit. We hope that that our process is a piece in yours, but don't take what we're saying as a gospel, especially not here. It's the first week of February. Like, there's a lot of information yet to be gleaned. There's a lot of this. You hear about the process. There's a lot of process left. So I think it's important to understand, A, we don't know everything. B, we don't claim to know everything. And C, we want to help you. We want to have you in here with us on this journey as we learn about this class.
Zach, I think that's incredibly well said. And one of the things I would continue to echo as well, for Zach, again, as he said, he's been doing it for public consumption per se over the last 8 years. And I don't know when he and Kyle Lebrecht were crazy enough to allow me to jump in on this operation, but it feels like it's been a good while. And in this time of learning under the school of Zach Reed, I think that one of the things that's so important to remember in this process, and I'm going to say this each week, so you're going to hear plenty of this. It is so incredibly important for everyone to understand that one of the things that we love is being able to do this rookie evaluation, diving into the film, taking notes of what we see, and relaying it to you. We love being part of your process. The fact that you allow us into your earballs, into your cars, your workouts, your living spaces, wherever you are when you hear us or when you consume this time, we don't take that for granted. And that's not something that's not something that we ever look at and think, no big deal, or whatever. Like, y'all could be anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here with us at this time, or whenever you're actually listening to this in podcast form. And we're appreciative of that. One more thing I want to make sure that we do before we get into more discussion. As we dive in and week out, one of the things that I really want to make sure is clear, Zach and I continue to do this as a labor of love. We're not being paid by anyone, and Fantasy Cares and the good folks over there kind enough to be able to lend their time and their resources to allow us a unique platform than typically we would have on a given year to bring you all this beautiful information. But we're simply watching and relaying what we see. And our hope is to be able to give you very clear perspective on the how behind much of it, and let you do with it what you will. So when we're talking about, hopefully one of the things that you won't hear is, oh, this person has good acceleration, or something that's kind of very vague and hard to lay a finger on. We want to try to be able to tell you clearly what we're seeing, and again, point you to spaces to be able to make informed decisions about how you go about choosing your own adventure during this rookie season. With that, Zach, I do think one of the first things that we need to do before we go forward is taking a brief look back. Any good lesson is one where we take what we've learned and try to be able to spin things forward. So if there's one thing, and I'm sure that there are plenty of things that we can talk through and probably have a full-on conversation and episode about, but let's start with one thing thus far. When we think through your process from last year into where we are at this point in the non-point scoring season, what lesson have you learned that feels as though it's taking precedence in your brain space right now?
One of the things that I keep hearing, and I've heard it last year, and I've heard it already again this year, even though I haven't put out any rankings. I've just thrown little tidbits of conversation out into the ether, is, oh, you're just trying to be hot takey. And I think that in this kind of climate, there is a lot of hot takey. There is a lot of people trying to earn clicks. There are a lot of people who are trying to, throw that Molotov cocktail out there and have people stop and watch it burn. Like, I think that there is a lot of that. I also think that and I know you do the same, try incredibly hard not to do that. Try incredibly hard to be objective in what is inherently a subjective process. And for me, it is looking back and trying to remember what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, and not bend to the masses saying, "Oh, that's a hot take." I try to sit there and remember back to AJ Brown, because I think that was the first guy that I evaluated, and people were like, "That's a hot take." I had AJ Brown as my wide receiver 1 in 2019. And people were like, "You're just being hot takey." And so for me, it is trying to balance constructive criticism, because there are a lot of smart people out there. Not all of them have microphones in front of them. A lot of them just have keyboards. And it's trying to balance that constructive criticism and take that constructive criticism and implement it, and also not fall victim to the crush of the crowd, the consensus, the idea that we know better, so you're wrong. And it's hard sometimes, because and we'll talk about this as we go through with this class. The way I view especially the wide receivers in this class is not the way consensus currently is viewing the wide receivers in this class. And it's really hard. And we talk a lot of psychology on this podcast specifically. It's really hard psychologically to be that. I always think of Peter Howard when I see the gif of the guy with the flag and he's out in the windstorm, and it's hard to be that guy with the wind blowing and the rain. It's hard to stand up and stick to your guns and say, yeah, this was my evaluation, and own that. And so I think that is one of the things that I have taken from especially the past few years, but it's gotten louder, it's gotten harder, there are more people who are trying to tear you down or trying to make you fit into the idea that they already have of the class. And I have to stop myself and think, look, I'm watching 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 games of all of these players. I am charting those. I am writing down exactly what I can go back and look and see exactly what I thought about every player for every game that I watched. And so that, for me, it's almost like believe in yourself, but that's not quite it. It's more than that, because it's not succumb to that outside pressure, but also hear it, because there are some really smart people again. And the wisdom of crowds is a cliche, because cliches are right often.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Zach, are you calling us the Philadelphia 76ers and that we need to trust the process?
Trust
Is
the
that,
process.
are we Sam Hinkie right now? Is that what's happening here?
Oh, I hope it works out better.
Hey, tell me about it. And that's a beautiful point because, and I think doing this with you and consistently taking this time for us to be thoughtful about the work that we're putting in, about the process that we have, and quite frankly, the positive results that it continues to yield for us with the work that we're doing, that does allow a certain level of confidence to come in, even as many of the voices in the space multiply, even as the big voices get bigger and small voices get large, and we're just a couple of dudes over here just hanging out in the corner doing our thing. And again, I think I attribute a lot of this confidence that I know that I continue to grow in this space regarding to you taking the time and understanding that when we do these evaluations, we have plenty of opportunities when it comes to misses that we have in the past. We are going to miss. Thankfully, we are going to have positive wins that yield positive results year over year, which we've been able to see. And that's not so much to toot our own horn, but it is to say that maybe trusting the process and trusting what we do in terms of sharpening each other, asking each other what we're seeing, asking harder questions about, okay, if this is what the wisdom of the crowd is saying, am I over here on an island because I'm being stubborn, because I am pushing against the grain? Or is it a matter of I truly believe that I'm seeing something different than whatever is sweeping over the majority of people who are also in this? And so we are in a unique position to continue to spur each other on in good works and leverage the work that we do and the process that we've done to be able to really yield good information for folks to be able to parse through. I'll add this as well in terms of one of the lessons that I've learned in the last 12-ish months since we've got together for the Hootenanny. One thing that I'm finding more and more cumbersome in the space is not allowing my doubts to be overwhelmingly discouraging for my process. And it really dovetails into a lot of what you just mentioned, Zach, and what we kind of unpacked there. But I think one of the things that I'm finding, specifically with last year's class, and when I go back and look at my own evaluations, I think one of the things that I have to start grasping a clearer hold of, and I forgot who said this, but I thought it was a brilliant saying. It says, I'm not wrong. I'm just early.
Yes.
I'm not wrong. I'm just early. And so when we see the likes of players that don't quite give us what we hope for, maybe in year one, in some instances, we've become as impatient of a group as any group in the history of the world. We want everything in very much a J.G. Wentworth fashion. It's my picks, it's my money, it's my evaluations, and I want them all to work out now. And when we look at the likes of a guy like, I don't know, Bryce Young, who I was really excited about 2 seasons ago, wet the bed in a major way. First half of the year didn't look much better. And then he closes the year looking like a very different player. Then all of a sudden I start thinking, okay, it's not necessarily that the things that I saw at the collegiate level weren't there, but maybe he needed more time in the oven and things finally came about. And the same can be said for so many players, but I would love to hear your thoughts on kind of the resilience that we have to have while not being too stubborn about our takes and having take lock, but also leaning into the work that we put in.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's funny. We've been spoiled, but we've also gotten a little bit hesitant because we've seen players get pushed up so fast. And when they fail, people come off them so fast. And because so many podcasts are talking about value and so many podcasts talk about this as the stock market, and so it's really an interesting, we've gotten so impatient. It is. It's the 877 cash now. Like that's what it is. It's we want things. It's the McDonaldization of society. We want to be able to, click an app on our phone and drive through and have the burger and the fries and the milkshake all handed to us and then go on our way. And the development of these young men, and I think sometimes we forget that it's really easy in fantasy football to depersonalize and dehumanize these young men, but they're also, transitioning from college football, which, if you're playing in Power Five, it's good football. But I'll tell you what, not everybody you're playing against, even in Power Five, is an NFL player. But when you're in the NFL, every single player is an NFL caliber player. And so sometimes there is a learning curve. Sometimes there is, a learn how to fail and then succeed, because a lot of these guys have never failed. And I think as a fantasy player and as a dynasty evaluator, sometimes you have to take that into account. And I think certain positions kind of bake that in. I think quarterback is one of those where you don't necessarily, or you shouldn't necessarily, expect players to come in and be world beaters. Yes, Jaden Daniels was this year, but I think he's the exception that proves the rule. I think that there are a lot more players who come in like Caleb Williams did, or like Bryce Young did, or every other rookie quarterback. Even if you go back to Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck, like they struggled as rookies. The game is faster. Defenses do a lot more to disguise themselves. And so it's a completely, and it's not necessarily as spread out, although if you're in a Shanahan offense, that might be fun. But like it's such a different game. And so sometimes we have to be patient. And I think the last couple of years, running backs was the place to be patient, because you didn't have these elite running backs come out, but you had guys who are really good. And you had guys that, like Kyron Williams is a prime example, who, I had as my running back too in that class. And he didn't get great draft capital. He had a combine. Everybody poo-pooed him because he was slow. They're still not sure if he's finished his 40, that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, these past 2 years, he's been a top 5 running back. And so it almost goes back to the John Wooden. It's be quick, but don't hurry. It's get your evaluation out, understand where you are, but be a little bit, get a little bit of leeway before you come off that evaluation. Now, there are also, especially with wide receiver, it's really hard to look at a player who's not getting significant playing time and drawing significant targets and be like, yeah, I want that guy. It's the Johnston in LA.
Quinn.
Yeah, like what is your evaluation? Are you sticking with that, or are you bailing? Because and he's a player that, because of the type of player he is, because of the way I think he wins, that's a profile that I'm a lot more willing to come off quickly. And it was the same thing when we talked last year about the top of that class, where you had Neighbors and Harrison, Neighbors. And so look, Marvin Harrison is, if I try to be really objective, I think he's the best player in this draft. And I had a tweet about this. I think Neighbors the way he wins, if you came back to me in 3 years and said Neighbors busted or Harrison busted, I would be far more shocked if you said Neighbors busted.
No.
And I took a lot of flack for that.
A lot of
And I was
heat.
like, man, I'm like, but it's not necessarily bad play. And I'm going to take heat in this class. Like when we get to Tet McMillan, I'm going to take heat for Tet McMillan. And I don't think Tet McMillan is a bad player. But I also think the way he wins in the last, since 2014, there have been two really successful players winning with that archetype. And one of them, it took a couple years in Atlanta to produce. And the other one started off and had, 13 straight year or 11 straight years of 1,000 yards. So like people are saying, oh, he's the next Mike Evans. I'm like, there's only been 1.5 Mike Evans in,
ever?
In 10 years, 11 years. So it's not like it's not coming off too soon, but also understanding the profiles that are a good bet, the profiles that aren't a good bet. I mean, running backs are a great bet because if a guy's talented and somebody gets, I don't like to say gets injured, somebody wins an all expenses paid vacation to Tahiti for, say 3 months, they can slide in. It's the elevator escalator thing where running backs are an elevator and wide receivers are the escalator. You have to wait for the people in front of you. Yep. So it's understanding profiles. It's understanding your evaluation, but yes, be patient because some of these guys, it used to be, a 3 year, like we were waiting on players for 2 or 3 years. And now it's like, well, they didn't do it in 6 months. So
they're trying to throw Marvin Harrison back to Ohio State. Like,
absolutely.
back this guy up. I was like,
he had a great season. Like he had a great rookie season. Now, were there a couple of players that had better rookie seasons in this class? Sure. But if you look at Marvin Harrison, like that's not a bad rookie year. He had 800 and change for yards, and and I know that he didn't win at the catch point as much as people want. Some of that's on a quarterback, some of that's on the receiver. Like it's not just one for one. And I was having this conversation, not to get too far inside radio, but having the conversation in the Superflex Super Show chat, and this is just like that. How things are like you gotta be a little patient, and Tommy B was like, his contested catch rate and his yards per route run were pretty good, and if you'd done this and if you'd been at the average, I'm like, it's not necessarily his fault. It might be, but separation and contested catches, there's a lot more to that than just what the receiver does. Where did he separate? Did the separation get lost because he didn't have a crisp route, or did the separation get lost because the quarterback threw it behind him, or the quarterback threw it late so the window, like there are all of these different things that number's nice, but you can make it say an awful lot of things. And even if you go from, if you go from PFF to Roto Underworld to, all, like they're going to have different ways to calculate and evaluate all of those different things. And so it's not, it's not unified. There's not the one definition for it. And so I think it's really hard to parse out what actually happened if you don't have the same starting point,
proper context, proper points of origin as far as where we're starting from. I think that's going to make a big difference in how we go about seeing the world, and not just seeing it from our own little stoop way up high somewhere. So Zach, are there any other lessons learned that we need to get to before we go further into laying out what we're looking at, how forward looks, anything else you want to make sure that we lament in this time?
I think, and this is a lesson that I've been learning for a long time. Our evaluation matters, but it does not matter as much as the NFL's evaluation. So if I think a player is not up to the level where I want to roster them, and the NFL does, I'm still gonna eat that. Like if the NFL is right, awesome. But if I think a player is really good and the NFL doesn't, that player, you got to move him back a little bit, but he's still a player that I'm interested in. But again, like draft capital matters. So if somebody falls out of the first 3 rounds, especially as a wide receiver, I can't this is going to be the Ricky White thing. Like I love Ricky White in this class. Ricky White, I think, is a top 2 or 3 wide receiver. Woo. Yeah, I really do. Like he's
that boy good.
Yeah, he is. But if the NFL doesn't sit, and I spoke to our friend Riley Bymaster the other day, and he was like, "Yeah, he's pretty good, but did you see this guy?" And I was like, "Oh, that wasn't the vibe that I was hoping to get from somebody who is down there at the Shrine Bowl, doing player personnel." And so, look, if he falls, like my evaluation doesn't matter because he's not going to get a chance. Like that's just how the NFL is. And so, if a player gets top 3 round capital and I like them, yeah, let's go. Like I'm feeling good about that. But understanding that even if I believe Rondale Moore to this day can be a productive NFL wide receiver, it doesn't matter if he doesn't get put in the position to succeed.
I wish I had a drink close by. Pour one out for good old Rondale Moore, Purdue superstar. Boiler up for all those out there. Good deal, Zach. I think it's probably a good time for us now to pivot into talking through a little bit about what we see, what our process looks like, and what folks who may be new to the program can expect in the coming weeks, months at this point. So where would you like to start when we think through laying the stage for what the process looks like and how we move forward?
All right. So I see Sniper Mel is in the chat and she's very excited, wants to get us into players. We're going to get there. We're going to do over the course of the next probably 6, 7, 8 weeks. We're going to talk about more players than you care to hear. And we'll get there before April. I promise we'll get there before the draft. I usually try to put out a top 12. It'll be out on Blue Sky at Tacit Assassin 13 before the combine, because I like to, that's for my own personal edification. I like to get out ahead and be like, Justin Jefferson is wide receiver 2 in this class before the combine, before everybody realizes he runs fast. I like to do that just for me, but we're going to get there. We're going to get to next week. We'll do 6 running backs. The week after that, we'll do 6 more running backs. Then we'll switch over. We'll do 2 weeks of 6 wide receivers. Then we'll do a quarterback and tight end show. And then this is going to be perfect because we've got the class participation right here. We've got the chat, and the chat is awesome. We're going to do the class participation portion of the program after we do the quarterbacks and tight ends. And we're going to do catch-all shows where we ask you who we haven't seen that you want us to talk about, and we'll talk about some of them. And so it's really driven by what you're looking for. We try to do some of everything and try to go down through, get 12 of the top wide receivers, 12 of the top running backs, because that's where most of fantasy football is kind of driven from. We try to do one show where it's quarterbacks and tight ends, because usually there aren't as many relevant quarterbacks and tight ends. Although this year the tight end class is looking pretty nice. and then again the catch-all. So that's what we try to do. And again, it's all about making this accessible. It's all about making this valuable to you out there, because like I can do this evaluation and never tell anybody, and it's valuable for me. And if nobody else finds it valuable, that's fine. But if I can do something that either helps you with your team, helps you with your draft, or if you want to start looking at players, looking at film, like we're always around, we're more than willing to have conversations about how we do things, what we see. I even, if you want, we'll give you like the sheet that we have. There's not very much on it. It's very sparse, but this is kind of the idea of the dummies is we don't know everything, and the people who tell you they do are trying to sell you something, but we're better off if we're working this together. We know more. The more eyes we have on it, the more voices we have in the space that are trying to contribute positively. So that's where we're at.
Very good. And I will challenge anyone that can hear my voice to this point. Don't wait to throw names at us. We already know that this running back class is one that is very, very exciting. We have names that many folks in the Debbie space have been excited about for years. We have players who've transferred. We've had players who are new on the scene. We have players who have been in our lives for 5 years or more, from big schools, small schools, transfers up from JUCO and smaller areas. There's a ton of people. So if there are players that you want to see in the catch-all shows near the end of our time with these evaluations, please make sure that you're shouting those things out, because once we get through the top 12 of all the positions, top 6-ish from the tight ends and whatever we tend to do with the quarterbacks, and we don't normally spend the most time diving into the minutia of quarterbacks, but we do our due diligence in watching those things as well. But again, if you want to see those folks, don't wait. Send those messages to Zach, send those messages to us, send those messages to the Fantasy Cares account, that Dynasty Dummies, wherever you can find us. We're happy to be able to help build a list that is folks that you want to hear about, players that you want to know more about. And maybe we've already watched them. Maybe it's a matter that we'll have to dig up some tape, but we will do our due diligence and we will find those folks to unearth hopefully some gems in our time.
Always love those real deep dives where you got to go like full games of like FBS,
Zach, I know that we're not necessarily making it a habit per se, but there was a question that was in the live chat that I do think is probably helpful when we think through the primer as well. And I don't know how much you want to get into process here momentarily in terms of what you're looking for at each position, or if you had planned on doing that. I know it tends to be a place where we spend some time. But one question that came from Greg in the chat, Greg asked, where would you gentlemen rank this RB class compared to previous years that you have evaluated?
That's a fantastic question, Greg, and one that we had planned on touching because we're doing the 30,000-foot view of this class. This running back class is deeper than any running back class that I have watched. So deep. This is not to say it's better, and it's not to say that it will pan out that way, but it's deeper than the 2017 class. I don't think the top end is as good. I like McCaffrey. I had above Genty, and Genty's fantastic. Like, don't get me wrong on that. But there was also Dalvin Cook. There was also Leonard Fournette. There was also Joe Mixon. Kyle loved Samaje Perine. I got in a couple fights about Kareem Hunt. There was Alvin Kamara. Like, that class was really, there were 5 guys at the top that you were just like, these players are studs. This class is deeper than that. I think that with Genty at the top, and then the two from Ohio State, the Hampton, like they're. I've watched right now 11 running backs that I am very excited to draft in fantasy football. That never happens.
Yep.
Like this is the first time that now the wide receiver group. There's nobody who would have been in the top 5 or 6 or 7 from last year. But this running back group is where it's at, and I know you had mentioned, and I don't remember the phrasing, but John Hogue had a really nice description of a class like this.
Yeah, shout out to our brother John Hogue over at Superflex Super Show, along with Tommy, who's also been in the chat. What's up, Tommy? Thanks for joining us this evening. John Hogue said, this is a contenders draft. This is a contenders draft class, meaning essentially, if you think about teams that are contending in dynasty leagues, we are looking at a quality group of running backs that can add to and help bolster teams that are ready to ride for titles this year. And Zach, I'll pass the baton back to you. But even thinking through classes where we were really excited about the top of the actual group. So I know that you spoke a good deal to the actual depth, which it's a very quality group going down the list. We're going to have 2 running back shows where all of the names are quality players who will, in all likelihood, one might assume, be relevant at some point in their NFL lives. But even when I think back to a group that we were really excited about, like the top 5 per se, going back to the year of, I think it was Jonathan Taylor, CEH, Swift,
Dobbins,
Cam Akers, Dobbins, like that 5. I remember people just having those 5 players ranked in all different places, whether it was the actual film scores, which I think is probably something that we need to make sure that we highlight, as well as where they were ranking even coming out of the draft. And when CEH went to Kansas City and people were really excited, and I'll tell you, I was really excited about CEH just period. And so when he went to Kansas City, I was excited about that as well in terms of what he put on film, how elusive he was, things of that nature. But the top 5 of that group, and I feel like the top 5 to 6 of this group, I would say, are comparable from an excitement standpoint and quality of prospect that we're seeing come from the ranks. If not, man, dare I say better, which is crazy to think, because you have the headliner of Jonathan Taylor, who, again, player people were really excited about for a long time. And look at Ashton Genty in very similar light of a college prospect, and the guys even behind him. We've got team. Oh my gosh, Zach, it's exciting. It's exciting.
And it is, but it also brings me to think about how to attack a class like this, because I think normally we either think, oh, it's a good class or it's a bad class, and you hear that a lot. Last year, I came on this episode of the Dynasty Dummies, the Optimus Primer, and talked about why I thought last year's class was a very good class, because you had multiple quarterbacks, you had multiple running backs, or multiple receivers. Sorry, not running backs, multiple receivers, and then a tight end. So you had top tier receiver, two for my film grades, high end receivers in Harrison Jr. and Neighbors, and also the top 2 quarterbacks, and then you had 3 other quarterbacks in the mix in the first round. So it was like 9 or 10 players in the first round before you even had to start like squinting. That doesn't happen every class. And so oftentimes you hear good class, bad class. This one is asymmetrically good. So normally when we talk about a good class, it's like multiple positions, and then you got quarterbacks, and this one, it's really running back heavy. Some tight ends, I think, probably end up being successful in the NFL and for fantasy, but whether they get up to the top group that really matters, we'll see. But in order to attack a class like this, I think you have to think differently than normal, because you are kind of conditioned to, draft a couple of running backs and then want to draft the top wide receiver, or draft 2 quarterbacks up at the top. And that, and I don't think this is a class that you should be doing that, because I think that there are a really good tier of running backs before we even sniff a wide receiver. And it's going to be really difficult to get yourself into that mindset that you're not drafting in the typical way that we always draft every year and that we're used to. To me, it's kind of like playing in the Scott Fish Bowl, where Scott sets up the scoring, and every year there's something that, if you pay attention, if you just go in and draft like you'd auto draft, you're going to finish, middle bottom of the pack. But if you understand, this is the value of this year, the value of kick return, and like sitting there and trying to make yourself draft kick returners or guys with kick return upside in like the 6th and 7th round, like, it's so hard. Or understanding that kickers score more points than, somebody you can throw in as your 5th flex. And to be able to grasp that is one thing, but then to be able to do it with everybody watching, that's another thing. And that's really difficult. But this is a class where, it's going to be asymmetrical, skewed toward running backs. Recency bias says you need to draft wide receivers and quarterback. We're in 0 RB, the throes of 0 RB now. And it's going to be a tough class mentally to get around. But if you can, I think you're going to be better. I mean, this was a class that we identified as a running back class 2 years ago, and was a class that, like, with my contending teams, I try to get multiple picks because it's really easy to plug in running backs on a contending team and continue rolling, because not only do you get production quick, but you also have the ability to trade them for a receiver and a pick and re-roll it after you get a year or two out of them production wise. So it's a fun class, an interesting class. I mean, I talk like we know, like nobody knows anything yet. We still don't know. Like we don't. We're still running recon. We're still watching players. We're still evaluating players. The NFL is still evaluating players, doing interviews. We haven't even got to the combine yet. Like, we're a ways out.
Yeah.
But we're picking up puzzle pieces. We have an idea. We're putting together the edges. You find the corner pieces, you work down, and then you start to build toward the middle. And we're still finding corner pieces and edges. But this is what we're seeing so far. We're not using the box either. No, we're not doing that.
Cut it out.
We're not doing that.
Cut it out. What type of heathens you think we are? Zach, I do think that before we end up wrapping up our time this evening, I think it is important also to set the stage a little bit in reference to kind of what we're looking for, what we'll be speaking to.
Yep.
And if you want to give a peek somewhat behind the curtain, that is the Wizard of Oz, when talking through score system, kind of what we're looking for, because I'm looking at, obviously, you all may or may not know this already, but for the folks who are new here, again, welcome and thank you for joining us. But Zach and I have been leveraging and using our film scores as exactly that. As we told you all before, this is early in the process of what you're going to hear from us over the coming weeks, and what Zach is going to outline a good bit in reference to how we're looking at these scores and grades and things of that nature for these players. We'll be referencing our film scores. So again, can things change between now and when we actually get to our drafts in May and beyond for our Dynasty leagues? Absolutely. there's much to be done. The Senior Bowl just came and went, which is another data point that is typically very useful. We'll have the actual NFL Combine that comes and will prove to be very useful of information. We're having pro days, other highlight all-star things, and obviously the actual draft itself, where we'll learn a lot about what the actual NFL teams believe about these players. So the information that we're going to be giving you and the rankings that we're going to be giving you are based off of our film evaluations. We'll be giving you our film grade. So it's not going to be based off of any kind of grading or back-end information from PFF and all of these underlying data that helps tell the story. Those things are great and they're awesome and they're beautiful and they're so necessary when thinking through putting the entire puzzle together. But what we'll be sharing week in and week out when we get to the end of every episode, we'll be ordering those players that we've talked about based off of the film grades that we've given them. Just to be very clear, so no one's thinking like, oh, I can't believe y'all had such and such that high, or y'all can't believe y'all didn't have XYZ at this point. This is what we see on film. You don't like it? Hey, God bless you anyway. We appreciate you for listening and unenjoying the process. So want to make sure people have that understood. So Zach, I'll pass it back to you to be able to unpack a little bit of how we go about what we see and how we go about scoring those things.
I thought for sure we were going to get a kick rocks, but no, you were you're still being inclusive and keeping the gate open. But yeah, so film grades, and I mentioned at the top, film is inherently subjective. Like you're looking at something and you're telling other people what you see. Now, we try to make it as objective as we possibly can because we don't want our emotions creeping in. We don't want preconceived notions creeping in. And so for me, I don't watch college football. I know, J. Mike, you watch some college football and enjoy it. And I am glad that you do. Go Wildcats. I can't watch college football and do evaluation because I don't want to know about these players before I put eyes on them. I don't want somebody else's evaluation. I don't want somebody else's impression. I want to see these players, grade out these players, chart these players, and then figure out what I want to or what I see. And then when I'm done, that's when I go and listen to all of these other podcasts. It's when I go talk to Peter Howard. It's when I go, especially the metrics, because we're doing film. I don't think we get that piece. And I think if you marry those two together, we're feeling a lot better about where we are. But from our spot, I'm watching multiple games of every player, 8 to 12, sometimes 16 if I don't love the feel I've gotten of these players, and starting at the beginning of their career and working forward. And I think that's important because you get a lot of people who are just watching the later stuff, and that's fine. But I don't think you understand the growth of the players. I don't think you understand whether they recognize the flaw and were able to overcome it. I don't think that you are able to see if DK Metcalf started off as a freshman with one release move, and then you got to his junior year, and even though it was a truncated season because he was injured, he had 4 release moves off press. I think that you miss nuances like that if you don't get a full cross section of a player's career. So we try to do that, and I chart every single game that I watch. I'm charting, and what I will do is a plus minus and what happened on that specific play. Whether it was a plant cut to get by a defender, or whether it was vision inside, seeing the hole open up, whether it was patience. And so every play, something happens. And if a running back is patient on 4 plays in a game, he gets 4 pluses. Okay. But that's only one game. And then I continue to chart, and all of a sudden you have 8, 10, 12 games where you can look at what happened. Now all of a sudden I can see what players do consistently. And I think that's important. I think sometimes this is a season where you can dream, because they could be anything. And so a lot of people see highlights and they're like, oh, that was amazing. Treylon Burks, one hand on the sideline. That was incredible. That's a highlight. That's one play. And if you take it in the aggregate, I think that what these players do consistently is the foundation. And then you can dream off that foundation. But if you don't have the foundation, your dreams are kind of smoke. And so that to me is the basis of what we're doing. And so it's almost like we're almost taking what somebody like Peter Howard does and giving it the how. Like Peter tells us what happened. He's got the numbers. It's almost like a story. You have to have the narrative, but you also have to have the character development. And so the numbers are telling the narrative. This is what happened. This is the action. And the film is the character development. It's how it happened. It's, okay, yes, this player got open, but is he getting open vertical separation where he's having to win at a catch point a lot, where he's not really open, but a quarterback throws him open? Mm-hmm. Or is he separating at the stem and then creating a window? And so to me, it's really important. Also, our evaluation is constant evolution because the league changes. The defense is always trying to stop the offense. The offense is always trying to change enough to be able to combat the defense. So we're evaluating different things. What I am looking for now is a little bit different than what I was looking for back in 2015 when, Jordan Howard was the running back 2, like, let's go. And so it's constantly changing because of that, and also constantly evolving because we can be better. Yes. And so currently, there's a long way to get here, but what we're looking for, and we evaluate different traits on a 0 to 10 scale by half points, and I think that's kind of where you were getting at, and then divide the number of traits or the total number by the number of traits, and that'll give you, because not every position has the same number of traits, so it gives me like a 0 to 10, with decimal points, so I can kind of put guys in an order. So wide receivers, I'm looking at hands, whether they're catching the ball out away from their body and strong, or if they're letting the ball travel in where a defender can get it, where the ball can hit them. You got a lot less control over a catch. We're looking at route and break, and that is whether or not they are able to leverage a defender, get a defender going one way and then break back the other way, whether they are able to be useful for a quarterback, because sometimes guys will run great routes, but they'll be, 4-second routes. And if a quarterback's only got 2.5 seconds to get the ball out, that doesn't matter. Sometimes a guy will run a great route, but not present himself to a quarterback. So that doesn't matter, because even if you're open, if you're not there, if the quarterback doesn't see you, he's not throwing it. Separation, and this is a really tricky one. I like guys who separate early and have a window for quarterbacks, because I think they are beneficial to more quarterbacks, because there are some quarterbacks who won't throw a player open. They need to see it. Dak Prescott is always the example that we talk about. Yes. Because that was, for the longest time, his fatal flaw was he needed a receiver to get open. All of a sudden he got CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb gets open. Even Amari Cooper, he had some success there. But I think that separation, but there's also vertical separation. There are guys who can go up and get it at the catch point. There are guys who late separate. So they'll allow a defender to close, and then they'll have a little bit of burst at the end where they'll stack a defender. They'll almost box him out, make a play. So there are multiple ways to separate. Fight, which is like the ability at the catch point, go up in high point, plays in traffic. So that's more across the middle, but it's making plays when you're being contacted. Post catch, the ability to make plays after you've got the ball, yards after catch. A release, that's usually off press. Although, man, college football is not playing a lot of press coverage anymore.
See a lot of these guys getting free money downfield for sure.
Yeah, the old off coverage, let's go. But that's like the release off the line of scrimmage. So whether they can get off press or whether they are, releasing quickly and releasing at angles to allow them to, again, leverage a defender, get them going one way so they can go the other. Their ability to block, which doesn't matter for fantasy points, but absolutely matters for getting on the field, and it matters to NFL coaches. And it also shows you the guys who like to kind of get in it and stick their nose in it. Puka Nacua is one that comes to mind that like he's a physical guy. I like that. And then the ability to adjust and make plays on the sideline. So that's wide receiver. Tight end is basically the same thing, except for I want to see them be able to run block and pass block. And I know that sounds, again, counterintuitive, but if you look at the top tier tight ends, you could, if you didn't pour all of your drink out, you could Kyle Pitts one too. Tight ends, the top tier of tight ends are guys who are two-way tight ends. They're guys who block and can make plays. And the reason I think that's so important is so much of what a tight end does for scoring is in the red zone. And if you can't block, it's hard to hide you in the red zone. If you're in, you're probably running a route, so you got to be covered. But you see all the time, Travis Kelce will have that little like block and then slip. You know, that little chip block, things like that. And I think that you've seen it time and time again. You've seen it with Kelce. You've seen it with Kittle. You've seen it with Hawkinson. You've seen it with Laporte. Like all of these guys who can block, can be two-way tight ends. Mark Andrews, like all of those top-tier tight ends do that. So that is important. It's just a little bit extra we're looking for above and beyond wide receiver. Running backs, vision. You know, do they see the hole open up? Are they making quick decisions? Elusiveness, being able to avoid that tackle. Cutting kind of pairs in with elusiveness, but not quite the same. A great friend of mine once said, similar, but not the same. Breaking tackles, and then power. And power to me is not just breaking tackles, but also being able to affect a pile, being able to make plays when the defense knows you're running and you've got to get those 2 yards. Patience, and that's a tricky one because there's a fine line between being patient and being hesitant, but you know it when you see it. And so that one is pretty important. It's allowing blockers to set up the blocks for you, allowing the play to develop before you hit the hole, as opposed to running up the backside of your blockers. Balance, pass catching, pass blocking, and blitz pickup. And then whether or not they can run inside, whether or not they have to be outside the tackles to be successful. Quarterback, we'll just run it real quick because nobody knows how to evaluate quarterback. Arm strength, accuracy, mobility. And so those two for me, accuracy, mobility, if you can do those two things, I am in. If you can't do one or the other, I'm far less in. And then the ability in the pocket, the awareness. So that is whether or not defenders are coming, whether or not you can pick up a blitz, because if a blitz is coming off of one side, you're throwing into that blitz because that's where the open spot in that defense is. They've just taken players away from it. Your ability to throw short, your ability to throw deep, reading coverages, and then poise in the pocket. I like a guy who can move a pocket and still reset. So I know that was really quick, but that's what we're looking for. There is a method to the madness. And I think that's really the important thing of all this. What we're looking for, yeah, that's cool, especially if you're trying to evaluate. But the fact that we have this, we know what we're doing, and it's consistent year over year over year over year. We can look back. I've got in my phone a document that says for Peter Howard, because he was the one who called me out on it. He was like, what are your top 25 that you've ever done? And so I have a running list of the top 25 running backs and the top 25 wide receivers. I can go back to 2017 and tell you where players fit in, where players. I have 4 of these that are just evaluations, 4 notebooks that are just evaluations of players. So it's not willy-nilly. It's not, I think this guy is good. Like, there's a process, and we follow it, and we stand by it, which I think is important. Again, not to denigrate anybody else, but like, understand who you're listening to, understand what they're doing, understand what you're getting when you listen to somebody. And we're very open about how we do it. We're not always right, but we can show you why, and we can show you why we thought that.
There it is. For those listening in podcast form, Zach was holding up, when he said 3 of these, he's holding up about a 2 to 3 inch wide notebook, a notebook, like he's studying for a dissertation or something from back in the day. Good deal, Zach. I think you put that incredibly well. Thank you for walking through that and putting that so eloquently for our listeners. And just like that, as you all will soon find out, when Zach and I get together, we love to have a good time. And time goes by quickly. Hour and 7 minutes in. And for those who are listening, joining us live, wherever you may be, thank you all so stinking much. Grateful to be able to spend time with you. Grateful to be able to launch another year of the Rookie Hootenanny. Zach, anything else that you want to take care of before we kick rocks?
I do see. Do you have a Super Bowl prediction for Mel?
I mean, I don't. In my heart of hearts, I would love to see the Eagles pull this off. And unfortunately, I don't know if I've just been beaten into a pulp or I'm just a really sad Jaguars supporter. And I understand that the Chiefs are going to do what the Chiefs do, and they'll limit their mistakes, make plays when they need to. The defense rises up and makes a play when they have to. And unfortunately, I think the Chiefs' kingdom celebrates another one.
I look forward to the little kind of I don't even know what you call it. It's almost a whip route where they're going to bring Xavier Worthy into the backfield like he's running across, but then he's going to stop and retrace his steps. The defender is going to think he is still going to the opposite side, and he's going to have a 12-yard touchdown. I'm looking forward to that just for Xavier Worthy.
We throw our X's up.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that's probably a Chiefs, and it's going to be hard for Tom Brady to sit there and he got to rest on his laurels for 2 years before all of a sudden he's being dethroned as the GOAT, which is wild to me to think. You saw, for me in New England, you saw him for so long be so good, and then Mahomes is just breaking that. It's pretty wild, but man, this was fun. I am so excited. It was great to see your face. It was great to start this process again. For those of you who don't know, J Mike is one of my absolute favorite humans on the planet. So this is double fun, where I get to talk to one of my favorite people about something that we're both passionate about. So it's fantastic. I'm excited to have the chat. I'm excited to have Fantasy Cares. I'm excited to Hootenanny yet again. I can't wait. Next week we will talk 6 running backs. I don't know that we need to preview who we're talking about. Fine, tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be here 9:30 Eastern. Tuesday nights, we're gonna take over the Fantasy Cares airwaves. And if you miss it live, you can check us out on the Dynasty Dummies podcast. And we're everywhere where podcasts are. But this has been tons of fun. We really appreciate you being here. Really appreciate you listening. Really appreciate the chat. Been absolutely fantastic. Fun class to talk. That's J Mike at J Mike Check. I am at Tacit Assassin 13. This has been the Dynasty Dummies. Thank you for listening.